Item 7C1, Mr. Igneri.
Item C1 is to authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute the Second Amendment to the August 28, 2007 agreement for professional engineering services between the City of Norwalk and A. DeCesar Associates, P.C. regarding the East Avenue Reconstruction Project for an amount not to exceed $359,000 in accordance with the attached scope of services dated December 30th, 2015. The various accounts here are noted. If I may make a comment?
Yes, sir, Mr. Igneri.
I favor this and I will vote for it. I think it's been in the works for a long time, and I think we finally need to get the plan done. The plan will coordinate with the state, so we will have a coordinated construction project in the area, and we look forward to having input from a small committee of neighbors on the streetscape and bike lanes and so forth. So I think it's time. It's time for the community to get involved and let us know what they want the street to look like as well.
Thank you, Mr. Igneri. Further discussion? Ms. Maggio?
No.
Okay, Mr. Hempstead?
Oh, okay. Yes, I got a couple of questions. Is the director?
Mr. Schimento, would you please step to the podium?
Couldn't see with the camera there. And I apologize. Normally I would try and make a committee meeting with some of the questions I have, but I'm involved with this in 2009 when we did the first study, so I need some clarifications, some items. If you don't mind, Mr. Chimeno?
How are you this evening?
One of the first things I got to have a question on is the taking of properties. I know that was one of the biggest issues with the council at the time, was the fact that we would have to be taking properties, and we said if the state wanted to take its properties on the corner, that was up to the state, but taking of anybody else's property is something we didn't really wish to have to do. Now, it indicates it here the 17 of the 25 properties be impacted one way or other, either by easements or or by actual takings. Is that something the state is doing, or is it something the city of Norwalk is doing?
Their easement taking, the state is doing the takings, the easements. They're all working easements, so that we can get in there and the contractors can work on the sidewalks and anything else. There isn't any other property takings other than the properties on the corner of Fort Point Street and East Avenue.
Okay. Under the item task number 2, it says update traffic study prepared in 1996. I'm just kind of curiosity, why won't we just do a whole brand new study 20 years ago? Why won't we just
that includes the far ranging area. We want to update all of those numbers from the 90s.
Right.
The traffic study that we're taking now and looking at will cover all of East Avenue, St. John Street, Olmsted Place, up at the exit 16, Fitch, Myrtle, parts of Strawberry Hill, Winfield Street, down to Van Zant and the upper portion of Gregory Boulevard and Fort Point Street.
It talks about the East Norwalk Bridge, and I think it's a good thing because we represent our task 5, which is to be sensitive to the needs of the people that live in East Norwalk, and having lived there for 35 years of my life. I certainly can attest to the fact that over the years a lot more traffic has come into the area because we're using our parks more. You know, you've had the development of Avalon over at Jordan Park, so the concerns are there. But if you can, I don't know if you have it in front of you or not, what we got in our backup. I had a couple questions on page 11, which was the chart of what DOT standards are, what ASHTO, I think it was the way it's pronounced. I have a couple questions. Well, the first one I want to know is that the vertical clearance, the council last meeting voted a resolution saying it should be 13.6. So I'm kind of curious why we're designing to a 14.2 bridge.
The traffic study will come to that conclusion. We haven't heard anything back from the state on their recommendation on the vertical clearance changes. As far as I know, they're looking at it. And that could easily change very quickly in our engineering. First, the first thing we have to do is do the study, and it'll take a couple months to do that. We're weeks away from signing any contracts anytime.
But if you design to a 13.6, would not that change the grades of how you approach the bridge and how you come out of the bridge?
That's correct.
And can you help me with the Metro off grade? Is that, it says Metro North parking lot driveway, 14.25% grade.
That's correct.
Because I don't have it in front of me, can you tell me where that entrance and exit is? That they're talking about a 14.25% grade to get into?
It's the existing entrance just past the railroad station before the station house.
So they're using the existing one that lines up
I
with the
think
light?
it's 9% in there.
And that's going to be that much of a drop, 14.25%?
It'll increase it by about 5%.
Not so happy, this time of year is not, not a good thing. I'm a little surprised they're going to allow that. How are they going to, well, I know you need to design it, but then how are you handling handicap accessibility from that side of the street up to the railroad station? Is that more of a conduit issue?
Yeah, there'll be two ways. They'll go past the driveway, and there'll be an entrance up by the station house.
The walk bridge project, I know that's a lot of concerns from everybody. It doesn't make no way you live in East Norwalk or don't live in East Norwalk. There's a lot of concerns about the coordination issue. I guess they talk about 12 meetings. I just hope there's more meetings with us, the mayor, and the people who live there on this coordination, because it's going to bring, I think all of us would be worried about bringing East Norwalk and part of South Norwalk's viability into its knees if this gets too out of hand with construction at the same time. I'm a little concerned. I get why they want to do it at the same time. Same token, I get why they shouldn't do it at the same time. But can you
I'll answer
more
that.
about that?
We have a planned meeting with the project coordinators of all the projects to ensure that we coordinate in such a way that it minimizes the impact on the entire city. It's going to be difficult, don't make any mistake about that. But we've been meeting on a regular basis. Unfortunately, the state of Connecticut is not even at, I believe they're at the 30% design phase right now.
Correct.
And they're behind schedule, and we have limited information about a lot of things, like what properties they're going to take permanently, what properties they're going to have a temporary taking of, and timelines and everything else. So we're working with Commissioner Rediker and John Hannafin, who's in charge of the Walk Bridge project, and James Fallon, who is the Commissioner Rediker's assistant, as well as our state delegation. And we've had meetings with some council members sitting here at some of the meetings, but those meetings are ongoing and will be more frequently scheduled and more widely attended as we go along. We also, the redevelopment agency tonight voted on a $52,000 expenditure to bring in a consultant to evaluate the impact on our local businesses and to come up with a mitigation plan that we're going to present to the state of Connecticut so we don't put our small businesses out of business. That's my number one priority. So we're doing that as well, and we're also going to have an ad hoc committee of stakeholders from the South Norwalk, East Norwalk area who are going to be most affected by the projects, so that they can keep us and be our ears and eyes for the project.
Good, good. One last question that I have. In the initial discussion in '09, and there were numerous meetings we had a couple of public hearings. The discussion, I think at that point, was that they were really kind of going to go 2 feet on each side as a widening overall. There was a 4 feet totality because they were going to try and maintain at least existing sidewalks there. I know they talk about a 5-foot standard in here. without trying to also provide some snow storage. And I'm, with two 11-foot lanes on each side, is that, so they're looking at 44 feet across? Sounds familiar to me, but I mean, is that pretty much the
That's
entire width
pretty
of the road?
much it, with the action that was taken in '09 and '10. That all goes along with the actions that were taken, and the very preliminary drawings I've seen, that is about correct.
I think Ms. Maggio had some.
Ms. Maggio?
I just have a couple comments, and I know, like, I should have just stayed home and talked to myself in the mirror with this one, but I just listened to Mr. Kimmel when he said about the charter revision and how we need to hear what the residents think. And we have received constituent mail, email, and personal outcry against this project. Last meeting, the council passed a resolution, which almost all of you supported, that would stop us from passing this item tonight until we heard back from the state with an amended plan, if you truly believed in the resolution that we passed. This is on the cusp of the largest change our city's seen in years with the mall, Waypoint, and projects, POCO projects all coming online. And we heard our constituents loud and clear. And I don't want it to be like a politic type thing, but the state is waving a carrot in front of our face with the money about that we would receive for the street for East Avenue. Sorry, but I'm up here for the people that elected me, and I had to listen to them. It's time that, we're not fooled with money, and we're gonna pass a ridiculously expensive study until we know what the future development holds. I think that it's foolish to go forward with this until we hear back from the state. Thank you.
Mr. Kites?
Yeah, I just want to echo what Ms. Maggio has been saying. And I'm not completely opposed to this project of the item in front of us tonight. I do feel confident if it were to pass that residents in the area would have their recommendations taken into consideration and implemented in the final plan. And at the end of the day, fix what, in my opinion, is a dysfunctional stretch of roadway, and without putting the cost on the city and the taxpayers. But with that being said, I'm not convinced that by moving this item forward, it won't negatively impact my efforts and the efforts of others to stop the roadway under the bridge from being lowered, and to allow for truck traffic. So therefore, I will be voting no tonight.
Further discussion? Mr. Bonifant?
Thank you. Mr. Hempstead had great questions, and Ms. Maggio and Mr. Kites kind of explained the way I feel too. But in the backup, we are reprofiling of the roadway to improve vertical clearance beneath the bridge. They're telling you right up front that this study is going to be trying to figure out how much lower the roadway is going to go. And in further, the vertical clearance is going to be 14.2, at least at this point, that's what it's going to be designed to. And so I have to agree with Ms. Maggio and Mr. Kites. I think it's a little premature to go forward with this now while we have a request before the state of Connecticut to reconsider the height. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion?
I just want to say, I
Mr. Corsello.
I truly do believe in the resolution, and I went beyond, and I don't think I'm alone, went beyond just the resolution and made efforts to limit the clearance of the underpass to 13.6, and I'm hoping for good news from the state of Connecticut, but we are under some time constraints here. The study is not going to commence tomorrow. It's going to be another 3-4 weeks before the contract's even signed, and there's going to be plenty of time to have the study move in the same direction of whatever decision is made with the clearance. We're under time constraints. Let's move forward with this study.
Further discussion?
Yes,
No, I was looking because I was giving everybody else a chance first.
Okay.
You've already spoken. Any other, Mr.?
I've spoken to
Okay, Mr. Hempstead.
Mr. Kimmel.
Oh, Mr. Kimmel, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I will be supporting the item. I agree with Mr. Corsello. These projects, as we know, take a rather long time, and to do whatever you can do concurrently generally is a better approach. Any engineering adjustments that need to be made can easily be made, as Mr. Chimento indicated previously. Like I said, and others have said it too, this is an important part of the city. We've been looking at this area of the city for a number of years now, and beginning to put things off at this point, I think is counterproductive. I think we should move forward. We will be in touch. We are working with the state on all aspects of the project. They're working with us, and irrespective of the final design of the bridge, I think we have to begin to move all the pieces forward, or we'll end up with different parts leapfrogging each other, and it will probably take a whole lot longer than it should. So I think we should pass this tonight.
Mr. Hempstead.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. 09, I was okay with this. I mean, there were some limitations we discussed about. I mean, just so, I was on the committee at that time, so my overall is not an issue with this project as long as the design is in tune with what the neighbors want and those who live in the overall East Norwalk. And having said that, and considering this was dated December 30th, 2015, and we passed a resolution 2 weeks ago, on page 11, I would like to make one small amendment. On page 11, under vertical clearance, because this is the design standards, and I would like to replace 14.2 with 13.6.
Excuse me.
You go to page 11 of the report, go down the item, says vertical clearance being proposed, I would put 13.6. It matches the resolution that we passed 2 weeks ago. I think we need to send a clearer message, and to our design people.
Mr. Kimmel.
Yeah, I will vote against I assume you're making an amendment, that was?
Yes, I am.
I will vote against the amendment. We sent a clear message. This is an issue that's being discussed here at the state level. I see it complicating the situation and slowing things down, because we are passing something which a number of us may not agree with. So I would go forward with this as it is now. If there are any changes down the road that need to be made, as we and the state start to work together on both the road work and the bridge work, I think we should deal with it at that point. Just as the bridge can be adjusted at any point in time by the state, so can the road work, okay? We are hiring an engineering firm to begin to look at all kinds of possibilities. Nothing will be in stone until they begin to look at these items. I have a lot of questions about what the traffic study will include and not include, and the scope of the traffic study. I'm not going to specify at this point every single thing and raise every question I can think of. I think we need to move this forward, and I prefer to go ahead with this, what we have in front of us. We will wait on the state. I don't think it'll be that long, and if there's as I said, a need for adjustments going forward, the engineers are fully equipped to do that, and it's not that big a deal, as we're learning with some of our other projects. So we make adjustments as we go on. I would keep the wording as it is right now.
Mr. Igneri.
I'm in agreement with Mr. Kimmel. I would leave the wording the way it is now. We are in communication with the state, Mr. Chimento, myself, the mayor. We will know if they change the height, and we will change the planning accordingly. We need to move forward. We can't wait any longer. There are all sorts of time horizons that we must meet. And to another point, as we're moving this forward, we will be talking to the neighbors, and we'll have at least, up to 5 other sessions, public sessions, so we can get the input from the neighbors to make sure it's in keeping with what they desire. But I think the amendment would only confuse the issue now. Let's move forward as is.
Ms. O'Toole Giandirko.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would be supporting this amendment. I I agree with a lot of what has been said from people in support and people not supporting this evening, but by putting this in writing, again, this supports our resolution that we did a couple weeks ago. And as it was said, in favor of the study, if the state comes back and says it has to be 14.2, then it has to be 14.2 and we can adjust. But let's start at 13.6, which is what we all voted in support of 2 weeks ago, and let us be told that that's not gonna work, rather than right out of the gate opening it at 14.2 and saying, well, it was in the contract. So I think it's a good way to get to the same point.
Thank you. Ms. Maggio?
I just had a question, legal, so I'll look at Mike, because he knows about this stuff. If we pass it 14.2, we could change it going forward, but if we pass it 13.6, we couldn't change it going forward because of the contract?
I certainly didn't say that.
No, I'm just asking. I was wondering if you knew that.
I don't know on top of my head. I don't know the answer.
So, no, because everybody here said already that this is a work in progress, but if we pass this contract at 14.2, we could still play with the 14.2. However, if we pass it as 13.6, we couldn't, there's no wiggle room for that. That's my question. I don't get it.
I mean, as far as amending the contract going forward, all contracts can always be amended. But both parties all parties have to agree.
That's right.
I don't think I asked my question right. I'm not getting the answer that I want. Okay. I don't think I asked the question correctly because I'm not getting.
Maybe you present,
Mr.
say something?
Mr. Kimmel?
Good.
I'm not going, no, if we're still on Ms. Maggio's question.
No, I think she asked the question and she's not sure she asked it.
I don't know if I asked it correctly because this is proposed to us as is, and the Public Works Director, the Chairman of DPW, Mr. Mayor, everybody said that this is still a work in progress. There's wiggle room for this. We could pass it at 14.2, but we can still change it going forward if the state changes their mind. Yes, correct? Did I hear that correctly?
Yes.
That is
Okay,
correct.
but if we pass it at 13.6, we can't change it. There's no changing the contract, because that's set in stone all of a sudden.
I think the answer was that all contracts are subject to
Okay.
change.
Okay,
I mean,
Isn't that what you said?
Well, if all parties agree.
Yeah.
If the parties to the contract agree to amend it, contracts get amended all the time, especially for these types of projects. I don't know what the,
That's right, we could amend it at any time. Right now, as far as we know, the design criteria includes a clearance of 14.25, and that's what we've left it at. Now, if it comes back, it's lower than that, we'll just amend the contract.
14.2.5 now.
Mr. Kimmel?
Yeah. My feeling is the resolution to the state is one thing. Right now, this project, from the state's perspective, at this point in time, is for 14.2.
That is correct.
Correct. I don't think we should change the wording of what we are presenting to the engineering firm until, while the state's expectation at this point is it's going to be lowered and the clearance will be 14.2. Okay, so I think we have to be consistent and not send mixed messages to an engineering firm in a contract, which is different than a resolution. The resolution asks the state to do something. The state will either do it or not do it. Depending on that, we would have to adjust the contract with the engineering firm, with the design firm. But I would not want to send, the state is on one level right now, and I think the contract with the engineering firm should be on that very same level right now. And I think we will create a situation where there will be a lot of phone calls being made from the engineering firm to the state, to us, not knowing how to proceed. And I'd be very hesitant to start doing that.
Ms. Maggio?
Then I think that it makes sense to wait until we hear from the state as to what they decided to do with the height clearance of the bridge before we go forward with this traffic study, or whatever, engineering study.
Thank you. Mr. Hempstead?
Just so I'm kind of clear, the city of Norwalk is paying for this engineering, correct?
The
And that's why we're here tonight.
That's correct.
So it's a contract with the city of Norwalk and not with the state of Connecticut.
That is correct.
So a resolution by the council, though non-binding, is supposed to be a sense of what the council wants. majority of the council, not everybody, voted for 13.6. This contract is with the city of Norwalk with an engineering firm. So I think putting in an amendment to match what the council in its wishes wants with a contract for design efforts at this stage of the game sends them in a direction. The state wants to come back and protest or saying no way, no how, then that can happen. And like everybody said here, you can change that contract or change the design criteria. But to start out telling a contractor with the city of Norwalk, ignore what the council wanted 2 weeks ago and just go ahead and do in 14.2, this doesn't quite compute, as they would say in my head. So I'm still okay with the 13.6, what everybody kind of, I thought, said last week.
Mr. Kimmel, Mr. Igneri.
He doesn't have a goatee. I still think we'd be making a big mistake by changing this at this point and going to 13.6. It will be confusing. The state is at 14.2, 14.25. Let's operate from that until we know exactly what the state's doing. Then we can change this agreement, and we'll change the designs. To make a change now, and then have the state come back with another number, a third number, and make another change, we're confusing the issue too much.
And also, just as a side note,
Mr. Capola.
I would just be wary of waiting for the state on anything, for whatever it's worth, for somebody who's dealt with the state on various things. I mean, if that's a concern, you know.
Mr. Kimmel.
Are we done?
Well, I
Were you done?
was just going to comment about Mr. Capola's comments. The state has assured us they will be back to us in short order, quote unquote.
And I wasn't trying to be sarcastic, but I was
But-
being serious in saying that the state, obviously, you know, these types of projects take a while, and I've seen over the years, quite often it takes longer than you think, or would imagine, so.
They have the same target date as we do, which is the end of September, or the end of the year, to have this all done so we can put it out for bid, both the state, and the state may very well include the streets, our street work. So I think, I'm confident they will be back to us shortly.
Mr. Kimmel.
My answer to that is maybe, maybe not. A lot of this is, from the state's perspective, you have to understand two things. We're dealing with a cost for the project of $2.3 million, okay? It's not the same as $359,000 from the municipality, however much that is. So the state has done what it considers its due diligence on a $2+ million project. Its engineers have done what it deems the right thing to do for a major arterial going under a railroad bridge. At the same time, the state is trying to coordinate its work on the railroad bridges with the walk bridge so that they can deal with the platforms, the commuter platforms, in a reasonable way to minimize the impact it has, the adverse impact on commuters, okay? So they know where to go every morning or when they come home from work on those platforms. If the state is behind and falling behind on the walk bridge, I think that will have something to do with when they get back to us on the, half a foot, 6 inches, 6.5 inches, or whatever it is. So even though it would be nice if they responded soon, I wouldn't count on it. That walk bridge is what they're preoccupied with. That's the major thing. They're not going to move and make decisions on that bridge until they figure this out, because that's when it's going to be done. So if they do meet their deadlines, that would be great. My point is, we should move ahead with the engineering study because it will conform to where the state is right now. And personally, I'm not confident that the state will abide by what the sense of the resolution, because we are dealing with a major arterial and they have their own policies about what roads should have trucks and which roads shouldn't have trucks. However, whatever we feel, I'm not sure that the TOD, didn't say Department of Education this time, that the DOT is going to bend. I highly doubt that, and from what I heard, the chances of them making the change are not very good, because, and I don't want to get into a discussion of truck traffic and all that stuff, but I wouldn't count on them getting back to us soon, but I would like for us to move on this design as soon as we can, so we're ready whenever the state does provide us an answer. And I think our engineers should be going along with what the state is saying at this moment in time. We would be tying their hands, totally, if we were making them dependent on the state getting back to us. Okay, and I'm not sure that's a good thing to do. It will stretch this project out and perhaps create some real problems down the road when the state finally does make a decision one way or the other. So I keep it simple, I keep it the way it is. Right now, we are on the same page with the state. The state has our resolution. The state will make a determination. When they get back to us is when they get back to us, and we can't do anything about that but pester them. So I would keep everything consistent and see if we can move forward.
Any further discussion on the amendment as proposed by Mr. Hempstead, Mr. Corsello?
Yeah, I'm all in favor of moving ahead with the study, but I'm also in favor of being consistent. I supported a resolution in favor of a clearance of 13.6. I think the amendment is consistent with that, and I would support it.
Mr. De Palma?
If we have to change the study, do we anticipate a financial impact on that? Like this amendment to amend it, would we think that would be, either way, if we did it to 13.6 and the state said, no, you have to go to the 14.2, would that impact this $359,000 number in an amendment? Do we anticipate? I mean, I don't know. I guess it would depend on how far along they got with their study when we got the
Well, I think we'd have to bring it back to the council to re-amend it.
But we would be
going back
forced
to
to
the
amend it
14.2.
either way, right?
Well, I don't think it would have an impact on the finances.
Okay.
Can I make a comment on that?
Mr. Igneri?
If we have the state right now at 14.25, and we go in and tell the engineer to go in at 13.6, and the state decides not to change, then we have to put in a change order. And he's going to have to change his design to meet the state. At that point, we're going to incur tremendous design changes, costs. If we start doing the traffic study and are confident that the state will get back to us, there will be no change order and there will be little financial impact on the city.
Mr. Corsello?
I was led to believe that, or I was under the assumption that the contract wouldn't be signed for several weeks. And before the study actually commenced, that we would know whether or not the clearance would be 14.2 or 13.6. So therefore, I don't see why there would be why it would cost the city more money, since we should have an answer as to what the clearance is going to be.
Okay, then I will ask you, if I may, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Then I'll ask you, why change now from 14.2 to 13.6 when we don't know what it's going to be? Why don't we, then we'll have to come back and then change it again from 13.6 to 14.2 if the state doesn't move.
Well, we've taken a very strong position.
Can I defer to Mr. Sciamento to kind of maybe put this in perspective?
You can pass it that we can do an amendment if that changes and come back to you, but we can make an amendment to the contract. I would say that the traffic study will take several months, and we're not in design on this at 14.2 or 13.6, and we won't be for quite a few months. The state's anxious to move ahead because it is part of that walk bridge, and they've got to have, I believe it's a 60% design done by the summer. They want to have 90% done by, I think it's the end of September, and they want to go out to bid in December. That is their time schedule for the entire deal for the walk bridge, and that includes all of those bridges along there. We're probably several months out right now from knowing what that vertical clearance is going to be, because we don't have the study yet. The study won't have really much to do with the vertical clearance. It'll have a lot to do with the traffic in the entire area. And that's the first part that we're going to do. Design won't even start on this for at least 2 months by now, from now anyway.
So if I understood you correctly, by having the contract read 13.6, it shouldn't delay this in any way, because they're not getting into the design phase until later on. Is that?
But then we'd have to come back here and change it, because you're changing it here at the council. Unless you want to give me the authority to make the amendment.
That may be a good idea.
It would be,
Mr.
if we
Igneri.
change it now, and the state that comes back and doesn't want to make a change, then we're going to have to make an amendment to change it back. I suggest we leave it as is. If they come down, we have one amendment, not two.
Mr. Capola?
I think that Mr. Tremento maybe made a good proposal here that may accomplish whatever he's looking for with regard to giving him authority, depending on where the project design is at in a couple months. Is that what you're suggesting?
That's correct. Correct. Then we'll come back with a change. I'll make the contract.
No.
It's either going to be 13.6 or 14.2. It doesn't matter to me.
Ms. Maggio?
I'm sorry, this is nitpicking right now, but it says 14.2, right? And I think we heard 14.2.5, like 5 times. So this isn't even accurate as to what's really going down, right? This is not, it's not consistent with what is really going to be built. It says 14.2, you said it's gonna be 14.2.5, so this number isn't even an accurate number.
Mr. Tremento?
The 14.25 is the number that was given to us by the state. I believe they talk about 14.3, 14.2. It was always around 14.2.
Is she texting somebody up there?
Doug, you remember that back in '09, I think.
Pardon me? Is she texting somebody? I think she's texting. Mr. Hempstead?
Sorry? Oh, well, I'm a simple guy. 13.6 is what we passed. 13.6 is what we should be saying to the state. We should be telling the state what the city of Norwalk wants, because the rest of the roadway belongs to the city of Norwalk. The overpass belongs to them. They are funding this. Other communities around us, and I will mention the towns that are a little bit east of us, when they changed the bridge on Route 1, they got the lights that nobody else can got. They got a railing nobody else can. They get to put flags on theirs up and down there. So when other communities want to fight for what they want, DOT tends to bend. So if the 13.6 is what we passed, then I'm saying let's put on the table, that's what we're asking them to design a bridge to, 13.6. Why can't Norwalk exercise its right for what it wants and let our delegation or whoever, I don't care, us, delegation, go fight DOT that this is what we pass on behalf of our citizens for design issues. So I have no problem. And you're absolutely right, you can come back and change it, but I know this process too well. And you're right, the traffic study alone is going to, and they can't, technically, they can look at some things, they can do the investigative underground work and that, and find out where the drainage is and all that stuff. But the traffic study, the design really shouldn't go into place until the traffic design, because that's going to tell you what you need at each intersection, what kind of turning radius you might need, because the traffic's going different directions, and the signalization work and all that kind of stuff. So, and DOT never comes in on time on a project anyhow. You know, the City of Norwalk does. But
The thing that you've got to remember is that we're talking about the roadway and the streetscape design. We're not talking about the bridge vertical clearance. The vertical clearance on the bridge is what it is. We're designing a road to go underneath that bridge and match the vertical clearance. The vertical clearance to us in designing the road and the drainage really has nothing to do with the vertical clearance. It has everything to do with the road and the drainage that's underneath the bridge. And I think the criteria for that distance of the 14.2 or 14.3 is how the drainage would be handled, and that's the lowest they can possibly go. I believe the federal rule regulation is 14.6 for that type of a clearance, you know, and they can't do that because of the drainage. So we're designing to that drainage. We're designing to the roadscape. We want to put the sidewalks and whatever else that we want to have in there to beautify the entire area, but it has nothing to do with the vertical clearance of the bridge. It's the roadway that we're talking about, the traffic study and the design of the road.
Any further discussion on the amendment as proposed by Mr. Hempstead? Mr. Corsello?
I'll direct this to Mr. Capola. If we wanted to have the amendment put it in at 13.6, would authorize Mr. Chimento to amend the agreement at a later date so that if necessary, so that the contract would conform to the actual clearance when that's determined. How would we do that? A further amendment to the amendment?
Yes, a further amendment to the amendment, number one. Number two, I would be specific as to what Mr. Chimento's authority is. So for example, at what point in time does he have the ability to be able to amend the contract at that point, based on what the proposed clearance height is at that time? So for example, Mr. Chimento, you were the one who made the suggestion. When do you anticipate you'd be in a position to make that assessment with regard to that?
I would imagine the state would have to come back to us on a vertical clearance within at least a month or month and 2 months. They'd have to. We have to know what it is. We don't, but they have to. We're going to design the roadway. Now, if we have to bring the roadway up 6 inches underneath the bridge, that's not a big deal for us. We're putting these numbers in there. These are the criteria that the state has used and they've given us for their design for the bridge. But if that changes, that's fine.
So if you went with the 13.6 height, with the ability to, I guess, change that in 60 days if you deemed it to be necessary, would that be appropriate?
Sure.
May I just be specific as to when he has the ability to make the change and under what circumstance? I guess at that point, it would be, number one, the time, say 60 days, and number two, you getting some sort of written confirmation from the state as to where they're at with the height.
That's correct.
Mr. Igneri?
Can Mr. Hempstead withdraw his amendment and we put in one amendment with your proposed changes?
Sure, he can withdraw any amendment at any time. Mr. Kimmel?
Yeah, I have a question regarding this procedure. So, okay, we move ahead, you're authorized to go with whatever the state deems the appropriate clearance. And let's say this amendment passes, this becomes 13.6. We settle the details of the contract, and in, let's say, 6 to 8 weeks, we find out that the state is not going to budge, it's not going to go against its policies in this case, and however much we may oppose the policy, they're going to stick with it, and it'll remain at 14.2. Now, do we have to issue change orders to the contract? And if so, generally when these change orders are issued, they cost money, whether it's in contingency or not. But let's take a situation where we find out from the state 2.5 months from now, 2.5 months from passage of this item, we're going to have to change the contract. The engineering firm would come back with an additional cost. What are the chances that the engineering firm will come back with additional costs based on design changes? And based on your experience, roughly about how much money are we talking about?
Well, I wouldn't know how much, I wouldn't know how much money it is, but yeah, there would be a charge to change that design if we're out 2.5 months or 3 months from now, yeah?
Yes, but is the point of requiring a 13.6 at this point to be able to tell the state we were serious when we say 13.6, and in fact, we're designing this for 13.6. Is that the reason why we want to put 13.6 in at this point, to be able to say that to the state?
You're asking me, yeah.
Or anybody over here? Well, if that's the case, I mean, what we're proposing maybe accomplishes that, because within the next 2 months, whatever the height is, as far as in the contract, it's not going to make a difference. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
So, unless the state has a transcript of this discussion, which I don't think they'll go to the trouble of getting, at this point, the council, if you make the amendment as you suggested, or the position of not only council but the city is 13.6 is the height. We mean it. We're designing it based upon that. Our understanding that that's where it's going to be. And you've given, at least here as a small condition here, the ability for your director to be able to make the change in a couple months if necessary without having the city incurring any change orders. I think that could be part of the condition too, that essentially the the time when you could make the changes when it's necessary to avoid change orders. Does that sort of maybe accomplish everything we're looking to do?
Does for me, yes.
Ms. Melendez, you haven't spoken yet.
Thinking. But then would that have to be that would have to be two different amendments to give him the power and then to change
Oh.
it to 13.6, or would it have to be within one?
One, by somebody who's really good at making the motion, so.
Well, I guess before we could even do that, Mr. Hempstead would have to withdraw his amendment, no?
You'd have to, I would suggest he would withdraw his, and I would suggest whoever makes this proposed amendment, write it out first so that it's accurate.
Okay, Mr. Bonifant, you had a comment.
Yeah, I don't know if we got that far yet, because we're in the middle of if somebody's going to withdraw or not, and then add something else. But I personally wouldn't be in favor of giving the director the authority to make a change on something like that, where if we got a notification back from the state of Connecticut saying it has to be this, it has to be at this height, and if that was inconsistent with what we voted on, then we could just deal with that at our next council meeting and go through the authorizations.
Mr. Schimento, do you want to comment on that?
I mean, we could make an adjustment to the contract at any time. That could be done on an administrative level if you want. If you want to give the authority to pass this at 13.6 with the stipulation that if the state comes back at 14.2, then we make a change order to include that.
Mr. Kimmel?
In my humble gloom and doom opinion, if we were to amend the amendment so that it comes back to the council, we could kiss this project goodbye. And that's the $2.3 million worth of it. Please.
Further discussion on the amendment? Mr. Corsello?
I tend to agree that, I mean, as we see, for this body to get things done, especially as it concerns this East Avenue project, it takes quite a bit of time, and time is somewhat of the essence with this project. So I'd only be in favor of an amendment in the event Mr. Chimento has the authority to accomplish any changes.
Further discussion on the amendment? Mr. Livingston?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Mr. Corsello there. I think we really need to get this set up so that it is almost an automatic pilot, because I think anything else is going to cause us to incur either expense or unreasonable delay. And I think a reasonable solution has been offered. And just to make sure, on the flip side, I think we're not authorized, Mr. Cimento, to make a change if it's more than 14.2. I mean, I wouldn't let him, if the state came back suddenly said if we could do a 14.4, I would not suggest that he be allowed to approve any sort of amendment, just one that goes up to the original limit we've seen here of 14.2. But I really do think we need to move this on.
Thank you. Mr. Sims?
Mayor, I hear, thank you, I hear a lot of different positions here. Whether they wanted, and I do remember that we all agreed, well, at least the majority of us agreed to the 3.6. And it seems like there's a consensus that that folks here are really undecided on both sides of the aisle here. And I mean, for me, I don't sit on that committee, in the Parks and Rec committee. I'm sorry, the DPW committee. Will it be detrimental to this project if we were to send it back to committee for further discussion?
Mr. Schimento?
Well, it would delay it a month that we could not, or more than a month, that we could not get the traffic study underway. In other words, we wouldn't have any approval until the middle of March.
Mr. Igneri?
I think for the sake of keeping this moving forward, the proposal, as Mr. Corsello laid out, which would be put it on autopilot so that we put it in at 13.6, and if the state comes back to us at 14.2, you have the right to move up to the 14.2, and with a stop order, you can't go over 14.3 or something like that, 14.25.
Yep.
You know, that would work, because we have the flexibility of keeping this moving forward, and we're still sending the message, in my opinion.
Mr. Sims? You good? Mr. Capola?
Two things. Number one, you talk about sending the message. Sometimes we say we're going to do it, and then it necessarily doesn't get done. So how are you going to do that? Is there going to be, I guess, tomorrow, some sort of a letter to the state saying, here's what we've approved, design up to 13.6, and we really mean it when we say this is the height that it should be?
This is a contract between the City of
Yeah, this
Norwalk
is-
and
this is
DeCesar
between the city and
Associates.
Norwalk
It's not a
and engineer.
contract
We
between the
wouldn't
city and the
notify
state.
We wouldn't notify the state right now. We wouldn't need to. No,
But I thought the whole point of doing it was to let the state know that that's what the height.
This is,
Well, we've done that by the resolution, I believe.
that's correct.
And the second point or question for you was, with regard to keeping the council informed as to what's going on with the height, would you be able to report back at some future meetings? With
We'd be coming back to the DPW committee.
Further discussion on the amendment?
Excuse me. Yeah,
Ms.
I
Millet,
have-
okay.
oh.
Oh, no, I was just confused. So if we take a vote right now, it would be on just Mr. Hempstead's.
Just Mr. Hempstead's amendment first. And then, if, depending on what happens with there, then the rest of item number 7C1.
So,
No, but then I thought that it would, you know, what was proposed was that we would,
No,
the
unless,
amendment.
then the rest of the issue involving 7C1. We could make another amendment on that. We'd have to make another amendment.
for simplification, if we withdrew it, we can then put in the new amendment.
Right, let me, okay, right now, there's an amendment on the floor by Mr. Hempstead saying that on page 11 of the contract, that we would amend that from 14.2 down to 13.6 to coincide with the resolution. That amendment stands right now. If we vote on the amendment, if it passes, then that's the issue. If it doesn't pass, we have to go back to 7C2, 7C1, and if anybody else wishes to make an amendment, they will make an amendment, or we would vote on 7C1. So is there
What
any?
is 7C1, I'm sorry?
The original motion. So,
I'm so confused.
again, if Mr. Hempstead wishes to withdraw, or if we vote on that amendment, we vote on it. Depending on what happens on that, then we would have to, that either passes the amendment, the motion as amended, or we then vote on the motion as it stands, or somebody else on the council makes an amendment to amend it again. Ms. Maggio, I
I was
believe you.
just, for clarification, the state's not going to see this. This is just between DeCesar and the city of Norwalk.
This contract is between the city of Norwalk and DeCesar Associates.
So if we have an amendment or a non-amendment, or if it says 2 feet or 17 feet, it doesn't matter, because they're not going to see it anyway. So,
Well, they've seen the resolution that we passed.
okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Further discussion on the amendment.
If we vote his amendment down, then we can put in the amendment with the,
Yes.
okay. If he would,
If he withdraws his amendment, we can do anything we want at that point.
Mr. Mayor, I appreciate my colleague coming up with that suggestion. I'm not going to withdraw the amendment because unfortunately, I would feel that sending out already like predetermines what their case is going to come back with anyhow. If we put an amendment in, giving it up to the department head to go ahead and make a decision, they know it, they're done, it's done. Yeah, but I get it. This can be done quickly. We could turn this around in 2 weeks, especially in Public Works. If there's a change to this, it can be done within 2 weeks, so we meet every 2 weeks. All right, so there's not some elongated process. The reality is, if everybody looks at the date, the last time this was discussed and done and everything was 2009, and they were in a hurry in 2009.
No, but we're really in a hurry now.
So it's like, folks, you know, there is a reality check here that the state moves when it wants to move on certain things. So I think if we had to wait 2 weeks, if the state came back and said, have a nice day, then that's one thing. So I'm not going to withdraw my amendment.
Okay, the motion has not been, or the amendment has not been withdrawn. Is there any further discussion on the motion as amended by Mr. Hempstead?
Mr. Mayor, call for a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Kides calls for a roll call vote. So now we'll vote on the amendment as opposed by Mr. Hempstead. Ms. King?
Mr. Bonifant,
Yes?
Mr. Corsello,
I'm sorry, was that? No.
Mr. Hempstead,
Yes.
Mr. Kimmel,
I'm sorry, I was writing. the
You're
other-
voting on Mr. Hempstead's motion.
No.
Mr. Sacchinelli?
No.
Ms. Melendez?
No.
Mr. Sorasas?
Abstain.
Ms. Bowman?
Yes.
Mr. Sims?
I'm going to abstain as well.
Mr. Kides?
Yes.
Ms. Maggio?
Yes.
Mr. De Palma?
Yes.
Ms. O'Toole Jindurko?
Yes.
Mr. Igneri?
No.
Mr. Livingston?
No.
Amendment passes 7-6 with 2 abstentions.
Motion by Mr. Hempstead passes 7-6 with 2 abstentions. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, Mr. Igneri.
That's 7C something.
Wait,
No, we haven't voted
that
on
was
the
just,
amended
the
item.
amendment.
Yeah, that was it.
That was just the
No.
amendment.
That was
Voted on the amendment.
We didn't vote on the actual item.
Now we have to vote on the
Item as amended.
We voted on the item as amended.
No.
No, we voted on the amendment.
All right, so now we'll vote on the item as amended. Well, roll call vote, please.
Pardon me, so that means we've just changed the vertical height to 13.6, correct? Thank you.
We just voted.
No.
Is anyone?
No, we voted on the amendment only.
We
It's
only
still
voted on
Mr. Igneri's
But
motion.
the amendment is
All right, we're doing a roll call vote on the amendment now.
No, we
On the
haven't.
motion.
on the motion, yeah.
On the item.
Now we're voting on the.
Now we're going to vote on the item with a roll call vote,
With the 13.6.
with a 13.6.
Thank you.
That's in the contract.
But you can now motion
Please, roll call vote, please.
Okay. Mr. Bonifant?
No?
Oh,
Excuse me.
you just got the amendment.
You just passed your amendment. Now that includes the amendment.
But now he's voting that we don't do the study.
Mr.
Voted on
Corsello?
the package.
Yes.
Mr. Hempstead?
Yes.
Mr. Kimmel?
Yes.
Mr. Sacchinelli?
Yes.
Ms. Melendez?
Yes.
Mr. Sorasas?
Yes.
Ms. Bowman?
Yes.
Mr. Sims?
Yes.
Mr. Kides?
Yes.
Ms. Maggio?
No.
Mr. De Palma?
Yes.
Ms. O'Toole Jindurko?
Yes.
Mr. Igneri?
Yes.
Mr. Livingston?
Yes.
10 yes, 2 no.
How much? 10 yes, 2
10,
no?
12 No, it's 12, 15.
No.
I'm sorry.
You want to count that again?
I didn't add them. 2 no.
2 no, 13 yes, is
Yes,
that correct?
Exactly.
No abstentions?
Right.
Okay, the motion as amended passes 13 to 2